UFC 309 this weekend, Madison Square Garden. The heavyweight GOAT takes on the heavyweight champ, Stipe versus Jon Jones, in a very good undercard. A lot to look forward to. Let's go and get right into the breakdown. And welcome in everybody to MMA Mondays here with the High Low Sports Podcast. My name is DJ, of course, and today we're going to be talking about the big heavyweight colossal matchup. And I mean that literally heavyweight, not figuratively speaking, like we hear a lot throughout sports. Jon Jones taking on Stipe Miocic with the heavyweight title on the line. Both guys have not fought in quite a few years now, if I'm not mistaken. 2022 for Jon and 2021 for Stipe. Serial Gone was the last fight for Jon Jones, his first matchup at heavyweight. Stipe, the last time was a loss to Francis Ngannou. I think there's a lot of talk about this fight from a lot of different angles, so I'm going to focus on one key thing from each individual fighter that I think is going to be very, very unique for them. We're going to go and start with Jon Jones, who is the current champion. There's a lot of talk his entire career, his range, the longest reach in UFC history, his legs, his kicks, his ability to control distance, and of course, his ability to wrestle, to shoot those double leg takedowns. What we saw against Serial Gane, he gets on top of his ability to punish as well as submission attempts. But I think what the key for Jon's going to be in this fight is going to be his clinch game, something that we haven't seen quite as much in the last couple of fights, but I think that's where he's been incredibly effective throughout his career. The ability to get in tight and utilize those long levers he has for arms to get underhooks, the shoulder crank he did to Glover Teixeira. When guys like Dominic Reyes close the distance, his ability to just lock up, whether it's with the tie clinch, utilize his knees, his elbows, his ability to control distance with the clinch, I think is going to be a very prominent factor in this one because despite what might be everyone talks about heavyweight, the size, the punching power, everything like that. I think what John's gonna have the advantage is he's gonna nullify a lot of that by closing in the distance, especially a guy like Stipe, who moves surprisingly well in space from what we've last seen. I think John's gonna keep it in tight. He's gonna try and press Stipe back, keep him in the cage, keep him almost stuck, if that makes sense. Keep him out of the way, keep him in a spot where he can control him with the clinch, use those elbows, set up those takedown attempts. Because if he shoots a double leg in the open, it's going to be a lot harder. Stipe is a college level wrestler, very athletic. He knows how to defend in those situations. It's going to be John, I think, controlling the pace and controlling it in those in tight exchanges because no one's really better in the clinch than Jon Jones. Very few can compete with him when it comes to those just unique ways to hit people, to hurt them. The knees to the body, the knees over the top from a when he has a tie clinch, he can go over the top of the outside to hit those knees from the half tie clinch going with them as well. The knees to the body. We saw it a lot against DC, especially. So I think that's where John's quote unquote one of his main underrated keys to victory are. Take a look at Stipe Miocic now, the previous heavyweight champion, multiple time heavyweight champion, are most considered the heavyweight GOAT. And obviously, punching power, the big thing we talk about at heavyweight, especially with Stipe, tons of knockouts, especially during his initial reign, taking the title back from DC with the knockout as well. His ability to wrestle when needed. We've seen him take down Mark Hunt. We've seen him shoot on Roy Nelson, Alistair Overeem, the ground and pound finish. A very traditional wrestler boxer type. But I think what's going to be interesting in this fight is his ability to control the punching range. We talked about Jon Jones in the clinch. I think Stipe, we saw it a lot with DC too. DC, the wrestler using the clinch. We've seen Stipe, who uses those body punches, kind of controls, keeps things in that boxing range. Not too close for the clinch, but not too far away where John can utilize his kick. So it's going to be a lot of yin and yang between those two. And Stipe's footwork. When he was at his best, we saw the Fabricio Verdum knockout, especially his ability to just slide while moving backwards, pop, just catch him right on the chin coming in. Alistair Overeem as he's coming in, get it right over the top of his arms. I've already mentioned the Verdum one as he's moving backwards. We saw it with Daniel Cormier. We've seen it with Junior Dos Santos, especially, who's known as a huge power puncher who likes to keep that boxing distance as well. Stipe is able to control it, get in close, get in tight. So it's going to be a lot of John initiating the clinch and Stipe trying to keep it boxing range because there's that's John's going to win the kickboxing range where he can utilize his kicks. Stipe is not much of a kicker outside, maybe a few leg kicks here or there. So I do think it's going to come down to John can win in kickboxing range where he can utilize his kicks, the spinning back kicks, the long jabs, or he's going to win in a phone booth. Stipe's got to keep it kind of in that middle ground between the two where he can utilize his combinations, slip like a Maldonado, I think it was, slips the right hand, cracks his own pivots off. One thing he does very well with that is just using that very traditional boxing footwork, the 1-2, the straight punches, the body hooks, keeping it very, very simple, I think is going to be the key there for Stipe. It's going to be a very fun, interesting fight. My only real concern is how much has the time off affected Stipe? I mean, we haven't seen him in 3 years, and he had a devastating knockout to Francis Ngannou. And then how much did the injury time off affect Jon Jones? Because he missed a lot of time because of that torn pectoral muscle. And if memory serves me, he's never had a major injury quite like that besides the toe injury he suffered in fight. Then did the Ultimate Fighter coaching and had plenty of time there. But as far as recovery from one training camp, recovery getting into another one, especially at his older age, I'm curious to see how that might play into the preparation, especially in that first round, which I think is going to be interesting. It's going to be, does Jon immediately start imposing? Does Stipe start imposing? So there's a lot that I'm really looking forward to. I think those first couple of minutes are going to be very telling as well, how the fight is going to go. I don't have any bets for now. I might have some coming Saturday as well. Keep an eye out on our social media pages for that. What I will say is, I don't see this fight going to a decision. I do think if Stipe is able to control it, he's going to be able to get a TKO as the fight goes along. If John's able to control it, he's either gonna get a ground and pound knockout or a submission. He's gonna be able to wear Stipe down, then get him to the ground and do what Jon Jones does. But with the new rules making 12 to 6 elbows legal, it would be a very interesting form of poetry if this fight either ends with Jon Jones winning by 12 to 6 elbows or Stipe winning by if it comes down to 12 to 6 elbows being the deciding factor, whether it is Jon getting a win and more or less more further cementing his status as the greatest fighter we have seen with the greatest resume, or Stipe putting an end to it with the move that has quote unquote given John's his only official loss that is on his record. It would be a very interesting form of poetry if it does, if that is the strike it comes down to. But before we get out of here, we do have a handful of other fights to look at with UFC 309. So let's go and look at the fight card. We of course talked to Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic, Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler has not fought in a long time, has basically been waiting for Conor McGregor at basically for the last 3 years, it feels like. They had the Ultimate Fighter series. Oliveira, tough loss to Armin not that long ago. Still ranked number 2 in the world, still one of the best finishers lightweights ever seen on the feet, on the ground. Rematch the first time they fought for the title. Charles with the second round knockout. Chandler still explosive, still incredible wrestling. My only concern with this fight for Chandler is he has to avoid getting caught because he is incredibly hittable. He is freakishly athletic, but he is very everyone has been able to touch him throughout his career. He doesn't the head movement isn't very strong. Actually, I kind of want to mention that with Stipe too. That's one thing he has to do is he doesn't move his head a lot, so Stipe is gonna have to move his feet, which he's done historically well, but he's gonna need it in this fight. Michael Chandler in the same story. Oliveira's gonna win at kickboxing range and more than likely on the ground with the submission attempts. Michael Chandler's got to find a way to keep that in boxing range like he did early in their first fight. But I'm curious to see how much that time off is going to affect him as well. Especially a guy who has I'm not gonna say his whole game is based on athleticism because that's disrespecting his game. But athleticism does play a big part of his game. His ability to explode and almost overwhelm people with how quickly he can go from 0 to 100, how he can close distance like that, and his strength. But let's look at some of the other fights. Bo Nickel, Paul Craig. Paul Craig, very tough fight, a good test for Bo Nickel as he continues to more or less kind of ascend up those ranks up. As here we got Vivian taking on Karine, ranked women's flyweight bout. Very even, tough matchup here. You can actually see they don't even have odds right now. It's basically a pick 'em. Then we look throughout the rest of the card. The one other fight I want to highlight on the undercard as well. Chris Weidman and Eric Anders. Chris Weidman as an underdog fighting in New York as well. We know how much he loved New York and wanted to get on the Madison Square Garden card, the very first one, and how much he campaigned for it early on in his career. Very interesting because it has not been friendly to him since then. So that's fight I'm curious to see if both these guys are in the iffy part of their career. Like, they're not down and out, but they're definitely not where they'd like to be or where they have been. I'm very curious to see what kind of Chris Weidman we see and if Eric Anders is able to keep a lot of that explosion. So that's going to be, I'm very curious to see how this fight plays out. But this is what we're looking at for UFC 309. I think it's an awesome fight card. I know it's not necessarily the fight at the top as many people are clamoring for, especially after the injury. I know there's a lot of the Tom Aspinall hype, but I, for one, just love the idea of this one too. You got 2 goats. You got a game of goats, as we saw before. I think it's gonna be an interesting matchup. I'm very much looking forward to it. If we get the best Stipe, or at least like 85 to 90% of the best Stipe, it's gonna be an awesome fight. I think there's unfortunately the "What have you done for me lately?" comes in, and the last time we saw him, he was getting starched by Francis Ngannou 3 years ago, and he's like 42 now. I'm really looking forward to this one. If Stipe comes in on his A game, Jon Jones comes on his A game, we are going to have one hell of a matchup in the main event. But let us know down below in the comments what you think of this fight and how you think it is going to go. We'll be back again next Monday to recap the fight and take a look at what should be coming next for both fighters. But we appreciate y'all for hanging out with us here on this Monday, and we'll see you all again next week.